It's time to do diligence. Here's your host, Wiley Deason.
Welcome back to episode 6 of our second season of Due Diligence. It is really hard to believe that this is our last episode of the season. And so I just have to ask you this. First of all, I want to say I'm glad you have joined me for these conversations. This is such a different season than what the first season was, what future seasons will be. And so my question to you is, have you enjoyed doing this, and what kind of sticks out in your mind?
I have enjoyed doing this. I was intimidated, not going to lie, by the whole thing, because it's different we have these conversations all the time, just between us, or maybe even with friends or family or whatever. It's another thing to know that I have a microphone on me and even a camera and lights. That can put a little intimidation factor. But since it was a conversation, I've enjoyed it and having these conversations with you.
Well, again, I'm glad you've joined me. This has been great. It has blown my mind. It's exceeded my expectations. And so it's been great. I will say a thank you to DP Media Group and Eric Wallace again in this last episode for helping us with this. In our last episode, we talked about parenting and the fact that the years are short. And we talked about that really in the last 2 episodes. And we've talked about priorities. We've talked about the importance of our role as parents. And we've talked about the memories that we want our children to carry into adulthood. We also talked about being proactive. And so as we conclude this season, and after thinking about all that we have discussed, and because of the time of the year that it is, I think it is good that we go back to a thought that we had in a past episode, and that we talk about how we can truly smile at the future. In Proverbs 31, verse 26, we're reminded of the virtuous woman, and because of her diligence, she was able to smile at the future. She had prepared, she had planned accordingly, and she did not have to worry about a lot. And because of her diligence, her whole family didn't have a lot to worry about either. And so, as parents, if we are diligent now, we can smile at the future. And that leads us to what I want us to talk about. You know, this idea of diligence is so important in Scripture. It involves the idea of earnestness and eagerness and zeal and devotion, and the words that we hear so often in our culture, being purposeful and intentional. I mean, if you read a self-help book today, it's going to use those 2 words more than likely. But it's such an important concept and even a biblical idea. And all of these things are necessary ingredients for us to make the most of our time in the home. And that's really what this season has been about. And diligence is all about being prepared and for making plans. And this is a very positive thing. We've talked about positivity. We've talked about optimism a lot. And that's important because you can't smile at the future without being positive.
Right.
And we live in a negative culture. We've said that already. But what are some things that you think are important when it comes to positivity in the home?
I think it's important to remember that you can be positive even when you are going through times that feel overwhelming, that feel challenging, and things like that. I think back to, we had it in our plans that I was going to stay at home with our children until, they became school age, and then I would return back to teaching. And in that season and that stage of being home with them, there was so much joy in all of that. But also, that's a time where sometimes you have so many things pulling at you, and you have these little ones that are so needy and relying on you for every little thing.
Absolutely.
That it can be a challenge, and it can be hard at times to be positive or to be joyful and things like that. I think that that's something that mothers could relate with. I think too that if you're a working mother, I think that when you're a working mother and you're working outside of the home, I think that you can easily be bogged down and feel as if I'm not giving anybody 100%. I'm giving this side and this side. And so I think it's just one of those things where even as you're going through those, I think you have to just pause and look at it and go, no, I'm thankful for this, and find the things that you're thankful and grateful for, even if it's something that seems very small.
Yeah.
I think you have to just remind yourself of those things throughout it.
Absolutely. A couple of things come to my mind when I think about this. Actually, there's a few things that come to my mind. I think first about priorities. People who have their priorities in line tend to worry a lot less. And so they have more joy in their lives. Now, sometimes there is a discrepancy in what we claim to be a priority and what we prove to be a priority in our lives. Last year, a Pew Research study found that 73% of U.S. adults rate spending time with family as one of the most important things to them personally, which is a high percentage, which you would want it to be higher still,
right.
But 73% is pretty good. But what's interesting about that is just a couple of months ago, 90% said that spending time with family was a priority. It may not be the most important, but in their lives, but it was a priority. And then the same poll found that the average family spends only 6 hours and 17 minutes together each week.
Each week?
Each week.
Wow.
So think about that. So 24 hours times 7, right? But yet we're only giving 6 hours and 17 minutes. So you have all of these people in our culture, and these were Pew Research. So they were researching, and I don't know what their model was for this. I would assume it's people who claim to be Christians.
Sure.
But they're researching this. And all these people, 90% claim this is a priority. 73% say it's the most important priority. 73 or 74, 73% say it's the most important thing. But then yet we're only spending 6 hours and 17 minutes a week with our family. And I think that shows you that we can say something's a priority. And I think sometimes we're guilty of that. But we don't prove that it's a priority. Things are not adding up. The numbers don't lie. And so these things are not adding up. And so are our priorities really our priorities? Are we being honest with ourselves? And how can we really focus on what needs to be a priority? And so the idea there is we have to have our priorities in line. And I think that's something that's just really important to think about. I think second, when we talk about this idea of joy, I think about growth. So I think about priorities, then I think about growth. And not just how am I growing as a Christian and as a person, but as leaders in the home, as a father and a mother, as a husband and wife. We talk about fathers and mothers all the time, and we've said that a lot. We've used that illustration a lot throughout the season, but even as a husband and wife, how are we growing as Christians, as individuals, but also then too, how are we growing as a family? And so where am I? Where is my spouse? Where are my kids? And where do we all need to be? Proverbs 22 verse 6, train up a child in the way he should go. Well, what is the way he should go? And I can't train him to be something that I am not. And so am I going the right way? In other words, are we growing? Are our kids growing? What are we being taught? What are we allowing to consume our time? What are we teaching? And how will that affect our future and the future of our home? And so again, are we growing? I think that's another thing that I think about. And then the final one that I think about here is goals. So we have to set goals to keep us on track with the right priorities. We have to have realistic goals for our family. We can't just shoot for the moon and just kind of hope we get there.
Sure.
We have to have something that's reasonable. We have to communicate those goals, and then we have to evaluate whether or not we're achieving those goals, and if not, why not? And do we need to kind of recalculate and kind of go from there? But we have to be purposeful and intentional. We have to be diligent when it comes to all of these things. So I think about priorities, I think about growth, I think about goals, and I think that all three of those things help us to have more joy and to be more positive. I mean, think about it. When I have the right priorities, I'm not worried about things that could distract me and distractions. And when I'm focused on growing, and then when I actually achieve goals, I mean, there's nothing that gives greater joy. I think about Simon coming home today.
Mm-hmm.
So our youngest child came home today, and he was so excited because he met his reading goal for the whole year, and it's just December. And so he's where he needs to be for May of 2025, and it's December of 2024. And he was so proud of himself. I mean, so proud of himself. And what that's a perfect illustration of what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
He had a goal and he achieved it super early. And so now my first question was like, well, do we need to adjust the goals? Because do we need to make it harder for him? What do we need to do? And of course, I'm not an educator, so I don't know the answer to that. But what I will say is that's what goals do for us. When we meet goals, they give us joy. And that's the whole point of growth. And the whole point of goals is to achieve them, it's to grow, and it's to be excited about that growth. And then it's to continue to grow and to not stop there. And that gives this great sense of joy. And I think for too many families, we have New Year's resolutions to lose weight, and we go join a gym, and then a month later we cancel the membership because we're not really going. Or even worse, we keep the membership and we waste all the money because we're not going. And so again, we treat goals that way. But if we actually will stick with them for our own personal lives, for our marriage, for our lives with our kids, then I think that's going to give a greater sense of joy. And so I think that leads us to the last thing that we want to talk about. First of all, is there anything else you want to add to that?
No.
Okay. And so this is the holiday season, but it's also the end of the year, and we're going to see a new year if the Lord wills. And so we like to set goals at the first of the year. So what goals are you setting for your family? And how often are you going to evaluate the progress that has been made? Now, when I say evaluate the progress in setting goals and communicate goals, I'm not saying that we need to sit down with our kids and recite our plans for their future with them and everything's going to go as according to our plans. Please understand that. But again, we're talking about growth. We're talking about priorities. We're talking about training up our children in the way they should go. We're talking about being the right people as a husband and as a wife. And so what goals are we setting for the new year? When I ask that question, what comes to your mind?
Well, I think that, my first thought is that people often scoff at the idea of making a goal because, like you mentioned, it's just something that we set because that's what people do at this time of year, and so we kind of scoff at that idea. We've referenced that in earlier episodes where we said that sometimes people, will scoff at the idea of you making plans as a parent or making plans, about the things that you will do. And I think that we absolutely need to be having these conversations and, like you say, guiding our children in how to do that. I think too that as we've had these conversations with our children, it's interesting to see what they even come up with as what they think that a goal could be for themselves. That also is fun to me to see what they come up with as well. And then, just helping them kind of figure out how they could achieve that goal, or helping them think beyond maybe just a surface kind of level for them too.
Absolutely. When it comes to the goals that we set for our home, we have a sheet that we have created that we will give to couples that are preparing for marriage when they come to us and talk to us when that occasion occurs. And we've talked about several things when it comes to goals. All of these goals are designed to bring us closer to the Lord and to be Christ-like. And so when it comes to individual goals in the new year, we try to focus on one or two things that we really want to improve upon as individuals. We might even have, and I don't know where we got this idea. You were the one who got the idea, but we might even have a word that serves as the theme for our growth goal for the year, a word like intentional or leader or something like that. But we may have something that we really want to improve upon. It may be something in our character. It may just be as a leader in the home. It may be something that has to do with our prayer life. Our Bible study goals. It might encompass all of those things. And we talk about where, as individuals, we need to see improvement. Mm-hmm. And for our marriage, we have goals. It's not just for ourselves as individuals, but we have relationship goals. Like, I remember one year we wanted to go on a regular date. We had kind of gotten away from that because we were so bogged down with the kids. So we had that as our goal. We're going to go on one date per month, or taking a trip together one time a year, or studying our Bibles together, or the one that I am the world's worst at, praying together often. And so we want to have those goals, and we want to grow in those areas. We have goals in regards to, or in regard to our work in the church. Mm-hmm. We have financial goals. There are all sorts of goals that we have. As parents, we have goals, and we look at each child, and we kind of look at three basic areas for our kids. We look at what we are doing to help our children grow spiritually. Even when your children are young and they are at that phase of life where they don't know the difference between what is right and what is wrong, there's still things that we do as parents to help our kids grow spiritually. It could be learning a memory verse. It could be, learning Bible trivia. And as they get older, trying to help them understand how those things apply to their lives. It could be anything, but that's the first thing, is what are we doing to help our kids grow spiritually? The second thing is, what are we doing to help our children grow socially in relation to other people? We want our children to learn how to communicate with other people. That's important. How will they ever be able to be evangelistic and to work with people if they can't communicate with other people and they do not grow socially? And so what can we do to help our kids in that regard? And then the third thing is, what are we doing to help our children grow developmentally as they grow and learn, which is important. How are they developing in their ability to learn, their knowledge, things that we deal with at school, things like that. And so we set a lot of goals when it comes to those types of things. Is there anything you'd add to that when we talk about the types of goals we set?
No, I think that, that might sound like a lot to people to break it down like that, maybe, but perhaps it may be better to break it down in that way, because then it's more attainable. Maybe rather than having this big umbrella of a goal, then if you're looking at it in these more specified ways, that might make it seem as if it's more doable in a sense.
Yeah, and I would encourage people as they're setting goals, don't feel like when I mention all these types of goals that you have to meet all of these types of goals every single year. Sometimes you may just have to focus on one area, and that's something that's really important to think about, because the last thing we want to do is lose our joy because we've got too many goals and we're putting too much pressure on ourselves.
Right.
We need to lighten up. And sometimes we need to just learn to breathe out and just enjoy the moment. And so certainly we don't want to put too much on our plates.
Sure.
And that's something I think that's important too when we think about the joy that we have. Okay, so what are your final thoughts? And this is for this episode, for the season. So what are your final thoughts?
I think the big reoccurring theme in all of it is communication, and being able to have these conversations with each other.
Absolutely.
Or, if you're not married, with somebody else, and just that that piece right there helps you to evaluate, to kind of analyze where you are and things like that. I just think that there's been a lot of recurring themes, I feel like, in the whole season, regardless of whether you are a parent, whether you're a spouse, an empty net, all of these different areas. We've had a lot of recurring themes, I think.
And anytime you do something like this and it is completely off the cuff, and that's how this has been for the most part, there are times when we've come in and I don't know what she's going to say and she doesn't know what I'm going to say in every episode. But anytime you have that, you have these reoccurring themes. But at the same time, they're reoccurring because they're important.
Right.
And so I think that's something we have to remember when we look at this. I think my final thoughts, believe it or not, are going to be very simple. We have talked about a lot of things in this episode and in this whole season. And you might be listening to this and you might be feeling a little overwhelmed. You might think, oh no, we have to make all of these changes. We have to prioritize better. We have to set goals. We have to evaluate our progress. We have got to do a lot more than we are doing. Please hear me when I say this. It is very easy to feel overwhelmed in the home. And so here's what I want to say. Take a deep breath and remember what Solomon said to his son in Proverbs chapter 3, in verse 5 through verse 8. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will make your path straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your body and refreshment to your bones. Listen, the best self-help book is the Bible. The best book on the home, on marriage, on parenting comes from God's Word. And if you will do what Proverbs 3 and verse 5 through 8 say, and if you will trust in the Lord, and if that will always be the bedrock principle for your home, then you will be able to smile at the future. Thank you so much for joining us this season. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And don't forget to join me for the very next season of Due Diligence.
Don't forget to subscribe on all major platforms and visit our website at due diligencepodcast.com.